Decided to buy a massive tent and stay there for a few days, and we loved it, absolutely loved it.
But I reckon just go to places like Taihape, go to like the
Yeah.
things off the beaten track and just meet the community. You'll have a ball.
That's the way. Maybe we should have focused on that instead, eh?
Yeah, not me.
Mihi Falls, Alan McElroy, thank you so much for your time. Have a great Friday, everyone. I'm Wallace Chapman, back Monday, filling in for Jesse Mulligan afternoons and the panel. See you then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere ake nei, a standoff at sea. A luxury cruise ship has parked up off the coast of New Zealand after most of the crew failed to get visas. So where to now? What about the Kiwis who've paid thousands to get on board? The Immigration Minister Kris Faafoi joins us, and we talked to the charter company. A wine delivery, a 20-minute room visit and notes on the back of a surgical mask. And MIQ workers sacked after getting too close to a returnee. 2 more COVID cases show the virus has spread inside the Pullman Hotel. Land of the long white cloud, or lily pad, are New Zealanders exploiting MIQ to get to Oz. A new addition to police uniforms here attract international attention, and the mop-up after the Aro Street geyser.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora ko Susana Leata with DNA. A cruise ship heading towards New Zealand with 61 workers without visas has been told to turn around by the Immigration Minister Kris Faafoi. The foreign-flagged ship Le La Perouse set sail for New Zealand from Singapore on the 10th of January, just 2 days after it applied for critical working visas. Here's political reporter Charlie Drever.
29 crew who were critical to the running of the ship were granted visas, but 61 staff, who include bartenders and masseuses, have had their application declined twice. However, Kris Faafoi says the ship began hovering outside New Zealand's waters this morning.
I want to make it clear that our border is closed. New Zealand citizens and residents, and those with valid visas and border exceptions, are the only people we will let into New Zealand.
Kris Faafoi says if the ship can't turn around, it will be escorted to a dock where 61 crew will be made to leave as soon as possible. The other option is for the ship to refuel and restock before leaving immediately. Pornon, which manages the ship, says Le La Perouse was granted economic exemption approval by the Director General of Health to bring the ship and its 90 crew to New Zealand. However, Mr Faafoi says a key condition was that all workers have appropriate visas for the journey. From Parliament Core, Charlie Drever, DNA.
There are 6 new cases of COVID-19 today, all in managed isolation. The Ministry of Health says there are no new community cases. 2 people who tested positive in Auckland remain in quarantine, and their 10 close contacts have returned negative results. The Northland case has also now recovered, and their 11 close contacts have returned negative tests, with no further people exposed. The Ministry says of the 353 guests who left the Pullman between the 9th of January and 24th, 313 have tested negative. Most of the other guests have indicated that they have had or are having a test. An MIQ hotel worker has been fired following a 20-minute bedroom encounter with a quarantine returnee. The incident happened at the Grand Millennium Hotel on January the 7th when the staff member made a delivery to the returnee's room. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says there had been communication between the two, including notes written on the back of a face mask. He says he did not inquire about the nature of the encounter.
I didn't ask for an explanation of exactly what the interaction had been. That person was in the guest's room for 20 minutes. They shouldn't have been. That was enough for me. Like I said, it's unacceptable. There are consequences. The person has already lost their job.
COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins. Auckland police are concerned that bystanders filmed an assault on an officer, then shared it on social media. The incident happened when police stopped a fleeing car at Orake. Adam Jacobson reports.
Police were responding to a report of a man assaulting a woman in the central city yesterday when a suspect fled in a car. An officer stopped the vehicle several kilometres away and tried to arrest a man, but was assaulted for a prolonged time. Other officers arrived and tased the suspect. Superintendent Karen Malthus says the video shows the officer in a very dangerous and vulnerable position. She says he was injured and taken to hospital. A 41-year-old man has been charged with injuring with intent, possession of methamphetamine and escaping police custody. Ko Adam Jacobson Tiene.
The government begins a nationwide series of hui this weekend on the Royal Commission of Inquiry report on the Mosque murders. The first 3 of the 28 hui in Wellington on Sunday are for all Muslims and Muslim women and youth. They aim to address questions about the report, the government's response, and how the community can engage with that. However, there is scepticism that the hui are being rushed, have not been designed with Muslim community input, and may end up being superficial. It's 4 minutes past 5. The Italian syndicate Luna Rossa has gone 2-0 up in the America's Cup Challenger Series semi-finals, convincingly winning both of today's races over American Magic. Luna Rossa won the opening race by 2 minutes 43 seconds and then took the second by 3 minutes and 7 seconds. Skipper Jimmy Spithill got the better of his American Magic counterpart Dean Barker in the pre-start manoeuvring, and Barker was unable to recover. The best of 7 series resumes tomorrow with 2 more races. If Luna Rossa wins both of those, they'll advance to the Prada Cup final against Team UK. The winner of that series will then go on to race Team New Zealand in the America's Cup. Benji Marshall has been thrown a rugby league lifeline, signing a 1-year deal with South Sydney. Marshall turns 36 next month and is now set to play his 19th season in the NRL. Marshall's career appeared to be over after he was released by West's Tigers last year, but he's been thrown a lifeline by Rabbitohs coach Wayne Bennett for a second time after Bennett revitalised Marshall's career at Brisbane in 2017. Liverpool have returned to winning ways with a commanding 3-1 win over Tottenham Hotspur in English football's Premier League. It's the defending champions' first league win in over a month. The win moves them up to 4th spot, 4 points behind leaders Manchester City, who have a game in hand. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Oscar Keikley on documenting the South Auckland music label Dawn Raid. Got the T-shirt, thank you. Moscow journalist Anton Choyanusky charts the poisoning and now the surge of support for Russian revolutionary Alexei Navalny. And Stephanie Dowrick, whose book about personal relationships, intimacy and solitude is still in demand after 30 years. It's just been updated. Love yourself in the time of COVID, you might say. I'm Kim Hill. Join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northern and western areas from Northland to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Cloudy periods and isolated showers today. Fine or becoming fine tomorrow, but morning showers about Northland, South Taranaki and Wellington. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with a few showers. Showers becoming confined to Gisborne and Northern Hawke's Bay tomorrow night, and fine spells increasing elsewhere. For Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Northern Fiordland. Fine apart from isolated showers about the ranges tonight. Canterbury and North Otago, long fine spells. Showers about the ranges and Banks Peninsula clearing tomorrow morning. For Central Otago, Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Southern Fiordland. Showers easing tonight, then clearing to fine weather tomorrow. Chatham Islands, occasional showers clearing tomorrow afternoon. RNZ National at 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A luxury cruise ship is being held at bay just outside New Zealand waters because most of the crew on board have been denied visas. The boat, Le Laperouse, was granted an economic exemption to come here for cruise season, but any workers on board needed to get special visas to cross our closed borders. The ship set sail from Jakarta just 2 days after filing visa applications for 90 foreign crew. Immigration New Zealand says while the ship was en route, it was told not once but 2 times that 61 of the crew had been denied entry visas because they're not critical workers. But Le Laperouse kept on coming, only to be denied entry on arrival. Well, joining me now is the Immigration Minister Kris Faafoi. Minister, how long can that ship sit out there bobbing around at sea before a solution is found?
Well, hopefully not too long. I'm sure that the people who contracted the ship don't want to have it floating around for too much longer. But as I said this afternoon when we raised this issue, our preference is that they stop hovering around our economic exclusion zone border and go somewhere else to make sure that they can refuel and restock if they need to.
What other options are there?
If they were needing to come to dock in New Zealand, there are a couple of options. They can come here and dock, and the ship has actually been approved for some maintenance and delivery here in New Zealand. The 29 staff or crew of that ship who have been approved visas could stay, but the 61 who aren't crucial for that would have to leave immediately. The other option is, if it were to come in port here in New Zealand, is that the ship could refuel, restock, and all 90 crew on board would have to leave as soon as possible.
So if they were to come ashore and the crew have to leave New Zealand, who picks up the tab for that?
It's my clear intention that they will do that. The company took a gamble to bring these people to New Zealand, or try to bring them to New Zealand, without the requisite visas being applied, and they will be responsible for the costs of removing them.
Did they take a gamble? Because the company seems to think that when they got the visa for the ship to come to New Zealand, that there was an indication given that the crew would be allowed in too. Have they got that wrong?
Yes, they have. When they were approved for the 29 crew, that still had 61 crew outstanding. So they were told back on the 12th of January, when they put in their initial application for a visa, that there could be issues with all of the crew on board. The boat or the ship was given approval to come here to be delivered and for some maintenance work. And the other 61 crew, of the likes of wait staff, bar staff, hairdressers and masseuses, in the eyes of Immigration New Zealand, weren't needed for that purpose. So they were told that those 61 crew did not have visas. Now, again, they decided to embark on this journey before they had visas, which they were explicitly told to do by the Ministry of Health mid-December, and they didn't do that, but they still kept on steaming towards New Zealand.
Wild Earth Travel are the ones who are chartering this ship once it gets here to travel to the sub-Antarctic. Now, Aaron Russ, who's the boss of that company, he believes it's the government that's let them down, and I just want you to listen to what he has to say.
The ship's crew that they've issued visas for, the officers and engineers are aboard the exact same ship as the hotel crew. They've all been through 27 days of quarantine. If the ship didn't have the hotel crew aboard, it would be permitted to enter New Zealand tomorrow. But because it has the hotel crew aboard, it's now no longer safe. It just doesn't make sense from a health perspective. This is an ideological approach to the border.
Is it ideological, Minister?
No, it's not, because Mr. Russ is wrong. This is not about managed isolation or quarantine. It's about the visa process. And the processes for critical workers have been in place for months now. And many businesses and sectors that would like to bring in workers because they need critical work done have applied and have been approved, and some have been declined. They went through this process and were told, in order for this ship to come to New Zealand and for the crew to come to New Zealand, those visas would have to be obtained, and they haven't, but they kept on steaming to New Zealand. This has got nothing to do with about time spent at sea. It's about them ticking the boxes for the criteria and going through the processes of getting visas to cross the border, which is closed at the moment to ensure that New Zealanders are safe from the threat of COVID-19.
But as he points out, these people have all been on the ship for 27 days, so they're basically
and
done.
this is not about 14 days of isolation.
So it's not
is about the processes that they need to go through to ensure that we are letting only critical staff come, or critical workers come through the border in order to fill critical skill shortages in New Zealand.
Minister, I just wanted
the criteria have been there for some time. They tried to go through that process, and those visas weren't granted, so they can't come into New Zealand.
Right, but Minister, you said it's about keeping our border safe, and then you said no, it's not about managed isolation. So just to be clear, this is about the fact that they are simply not critical workers in your view.
Those criteria, the border is closed, but some sectors and some companies do have the ability, through the exemption and exception process, to bring in critical workers. There are criteria for that. You have to make sure that they have the requisite essential skills and experience, and in the view of Immigration New Zealand, the 61 staff didn't have that and actually weren't needed for the purpose which the boat or the ship was given approval. Those visas weren't granted. The border is closed, and I think the New Zealand public expect and the government demands that people adhere to the processes to keep our borders secure.
So do you think that those positions of the people that haven't got visas, they can be filled by Kiwis?
So, no, the criteria is that those staff are required for the journey and have the essential skills and experience to fill those roles.
They argue that they do. They argue that they do.
Well,
and just let me explain why.
The assessment of Immigration New Zealand is that they don't.
OK, well, they argue against that, and let's just discuss that. They say that while you might call them hairdressers and waiters and masseuses, they are trained in skills, for example, operating the lifeboats, are on the stretcher team, are on the medical team, etc. They have dual roles, and that is why the company says they are essential.
And there are a lot of other sectors, like REC workers, like primary sector, that go through the process because they have skill shortages. And if we believe that they're critical to some of those sectors and some of those shortages, they go through the process. And if they apply for visas and are approved, they will bring those staff in. You don't get to bring them in if you don't have a visa approved. These crew don't have a visa approved. In fact, they were declined twice, and the public expect us to keep the borders strictly protected.
Did any government ministry or officials advise them to offload those crews somewhere in the Pacific?
Look, I don't know that for sure, but I think perhaps because they were told back on the 12th of January and the visas were declined initially on the 22nd of January, the pragmatic option of them with the 90 crew on board to allow the 29 visa holders crew who do have a visa may have been given to the company. Either way, they continued towards New Zealand with a full complement of 90 crew, 61 of whom do not have valid visas to enter the country.
Have they got enough supplies, food, everything they need to safely be out there while this is sorted out?
Those conversations are happening now with senior border officials. If they don't have enough fuel, then of course we'll make sure that they are safe and that they can come to port. As I mentioned, we'll be able to refuel and restock. The option around whether the 29 crew will stay or whether they all go is still a live conversation between the ship's agents and border officials as we speak.
What if they come into our economic waters? What does that change? How does that change the situation legally?
As I say, it doesn't. They'll be escorted. If they need to come in, they'll be escorted into port if they need to refuel and restock. But I think earlier this week they were told that they had 61 people on board who don't hold valid visas and they were not to enter New Zealand because those people did not have those visas.
So are the Wiggles essential critical workers of great economic benefit more so than the people on this ship?
So if you look at the criteria and the parameters for essential and critical workers, they were for economic, cultural and social purposes. So I didn't see the application for the Wiggles. The issue with them wasn't about their visas last week. It was about the managed isolation places they weren't able to secure. But the overall and high level messages is if businesses or individuals or organisations want to bring people into the country, then they have to get their I's dotted and their T's crossed in order to bring people in. The border is closed for good reason, to keep us safe. We've all just enjoyed a Christmas to be able and enjoyed the safety of the level settings that we were at.
But you've said it's not a safety issue with these crew members.
But, Lisa, as I say, it's not about time in managed isolation. The criteria set says make sure that when the border is shut, to keep us safe, that if critical staff are to be brought in, there is a criteria in which to judge that. Immigration New Zealand judged that 61 of the 90 crew on board don't meet that requirement, and so they shouldn't come into New Zealand. That the owner of that ship or the agents of that ship have known that now since the 22nd of January. They continued to steam towards our border, and as we've said, officials have told them with those 61 on board, they shouldn't come to New Zealand because they don't have a visa.
The New Zealand Cruise Association has put out a press statement saying the decision by Immigration New Zealand tarnishes New Zealand as a cruise-friendly destination, and it's undone years of hard work and it is quite simply not good enough. Your response, Minister?
Well, the only truth in that could be is if people look at that and the work that the cruise industry has done and realise that they didn't do the right work in terms of the processes and meeting the criteria to make sure that a ship could do what it wanted to do. There's a process, there are criteria, it wasn't met in time so therefore a ship is off our coast, and those 61 people aren't meant to be coming here, and we'll try our darndest to make sure they don't.
And your timeline to get it sorted?
Oh, as soon as possible. As I say, officials are speaking to the crew of the ship and their agents to figure out what the situation is with their fuel and their stocks, whether they're able to travel to another port to gather their thoughts and give themselves more options. As I say, 29 of the crew do have valid visas. They might have to go away and offload those 61 crew, as we mentioned before, and come back for the actual purpose. But that is a call for the cruise ship company and those who contracted it to come here in New Zealand.
Thanks for your time this evening. That is Immigration Minister Kris Faafoi. It is 19 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Now, still to come on the programme, we'll have the full interview with Aaron Russ of Wild Earth Travel. That is the company that's chartering the ship for cruises, and we'll talk to him about what this situation means for those cruisers and the passengers who are paid up for those trips. A wine delivery, a note penned on the back of a surgical mask, and what's been described as a bedroom encounter has seen an Auckland MIQ worker given the boot. It's been revealed an isolating returnee and staff member were exchanging notes, and the worker was caught after 20 minutes in the returnee's room at the Grand Millennium. Unacceptable, says the COVID recovery minister. As well as that, authorities have revealed another 2 people have caught the virus while in managed isolation at the Pullman Hotel. Katie Todd reports.
An illicit encounter at what's supposed to be a secure environment. An MIQ worker has lost their job for a rendezvous with a returnee at the Grand Millennium in central Auckland. On the 7th of January, the worker entered a guest's room to deliver a bottle of wine and stayed for 20 minutes. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says the pair had shared notes, including one written on the back of a face mask.
I didn't inquire into specifically the nature of the encounter, but there was a 20-minute encounter. That was enough for me to know that was unacceptable.
While the encounter isn't thought to have put others at risk, it's been chided as irresponsible and incredibly disappointing by Head of Managed Isolation and Quarantine Brigadier Jim Bliss. Chris Hipkins says the staffer has been sanctioned.
Obviously, I asked for that to be fully investigated and for appropriate action to be taken. I understand that appropriate action has now been taken and that person's no longer working for managed isolation.
There are no new community cases of COVID today, but authorities have revealed there are 2 other people who they believe caught the virus in the Pullman Hotel. They were staying on the same floor and have the South African variant strain of the virus. Mr Hipkins has admitted there's something going on at the Pullman. Director General of Health Ashley Bloomfield says stricter measures are in place until more is known.
No new arrivals are going into the Pullman, as the Minister mentioned. A significant restriction on movements outside of rooms for everybody, and no movement outside of rooms once people have had that final test at day 12.
There's another set of tougher measures coming into place too. Those leaving the Pullman Hotel must isolate at home and have a follow-up test 5 days later, while testing of staff is being ramped up and the ventilation systems are being upgraded. Pullman guests will only be able to exercise in limited numbers, and with those on their flight. Curbs have also been put on smoking sessions, which are now capped at 10 minutes and a maximum of 2 people at a time who are from the same flight. With no new community cases, today's 1 p.m. briefing granted the green light to thousands of holidaymakers and concert goers with Auckland Anniversary Weekend plans. After a frazzling week for organisers, Auckland International Buskers Festival, Chinese New Year Festival and Auckland Folk Festival will continue in the freedom of Alert Level 1. Next week, the first of more than 200 Auckland Pride events will kick off across the city. Relieved Festival Director Max Tweedy says organisers are aware just how quickly the situation can change.
That's our kind of worst case scenario, is that we have one of these 1 p.m. or 4 p.m. updates in the middle of the festival, and events that evening have to change the style of their events and the way that they run with any new alert level setting. So we're prepared. Dr.
Bloomfield is urging people to keep using the COVID Tracer app and stay home if they're sick. For Checkpoint, call Katie Todd, TNA.
The race is on in Australia to find 9 former Pullman hotel guests who jetted across the ditch after serving their 2 weeks in MIQ here. In total, 12 guests who were at the Pullman at the same time as New Zealand's latest community cases travelled on to Australia. 3 are understood to have flown to Hong Kong. Here's our reporter Nick Trubridge.
Managed isolation Australian style. Fair to say it's a slightly less pleasant experience compared to the relative luxuries afforded to guests in New Zealand's ISO hotels. Need some fresh air? Too bad. Returnees to Australia aren't allowed out of their rooms for 14 days. And in some states like New South Wales, the government will charge more for your stay than you'd be charged in New Zealand. On the matter of money, you've got 90 days to pay for your isolation in New Zealand, but just 30 in Australia. So have our managed isolation facilities become a lily pad to enter Australia? Dr. Ashley Bloomfield today conceding that could well be the case.
Clearly there were some people who travelled to New Zealand with the intention of then travelling on to Australia, and they did.
That's left Australian health authorities scrambling to find and test 9 people who flew across the Tasman after completing managed isolation at the Pullman, and before the one-way travel bubble was put on hold. They were at the Pullman at the same time as New Zealand's latest community cases who are believed to have contracted the virus at the hotel. And on the back of Dr. Bloomfield's comments, COVID-19 Response Minister Kris Faafoi says it's possible New Zealand's MIQ facilities are being used as a corridor.
It's possible. I think the number of people doing that would be very limited. I've not seen any evidence that that's a widespread practice, but it's certainly possible.
Checkpoint has approached the Australian Department of Health to ask whether the 9 Pullman guests believed to still be in Australia have been located and tested. We also wanted to know whether any of those guests had tested positive for COVID-19, but we received no response. Dr. Bloomfield, though, says he's not aware of any positive tests linked to the Pullman guests. He says New Zealand authorities swiftly told their Australian counterparts about the guests having gone on to enter Australia.
Actually, the Australians sent a request through our national focal point yesterday, and we replied to them as quickly as we could by asking our customs colleagues which of the people who had been in the Pullman had since departed. In fact, we were so helpful to our Australian colleagues that they knew about it before I did.
Meanwhile, Melbourne-based epidemiologist Tony Blakely says it's not surprising some people have dropped in here to do their MIQ before heading off again.
So there's this concept called state or country hopping, and it's one that we've been concerned about the whole way through with travel bubbles. And indeed, it happens with immigration more widely, but over a long time scale. So you basically go to a place where you can get yourself quarantined, and then if there's an open border, you can then scoot on through.
He says it might be time to change the setup of our MIQ facilities so COVID-19 isn't transmitted between people who are isolating.
Where possible, this is the big one, the hard one, where possible using dedicated quarantine facilities. So over here in the Northern Territories, there's a place called Howard Springs, which is, really good setup with lots of cottages scattered around, natural ventilation so you don't run the risk of aerosol transmission. And so far, they've taken a lot of people through and not yet one quarantine breach.
Meanwhile, Australian Health Minister Greg Hunt says the government there hopes to recommence the one-way travel bubble with New Zealand in the coming days. For Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
And we are keen for your feedback on that. What do you think about people heading to Australia once they've done their managed isolation here? You can text us on 2101, tweet us at checkpointrnz, or you can send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And a few of you getting in touch about this cruise ship, which is bobbing off the coast of New Zealand. The Minister of Immigration wants it to turn around and go away because it's got about 61 people on board who don't have visas to enter New Zealand. This listener says, we understand the ship is run by a New Zealand company. If it's bringing money into New Zealand, why the Wiggles but not these guys? They must be COVID-free if they've been at sea to get here. They have been at sea for 27 days at the moment. Ashley says all visa problems could be avoided if Russ et al. Had employed New Zealanders. So it's all about cheap labour, says Ashley. And someone else says, so what is critical about the Wiggles? Because the 61 people on board the ship have been denied visas because they're not regarded as critical workers. Someone else, though, says, leave the Wiggles out of this argument, please. They are trying to come to entertain our children. The cruise ship did not get visa approval to come to New Zealand. Do keep your feedback coming. New Zealand has had to extricate itself from a diplomatic minefield after its Trade Minister used a TV interview to advise Australia on how to improve relations with China. The faux pas has prompted furious backpedalling amid fears it paints New Zealand as naive. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
If only Damien O'Connor had noted his own advice, a little more diplomacy, a little more caution. Instead, here he is on CNBC, offering some helpful suggestions on Australia's relationship with China.
Clearly, if they were to, follow us and show respect, I guess a little more diplomacy from time to time and be cautious with wording.
The advice went down like a cup of cold sick, with local media describing senior officials as furious. At home, it was full damage control, with the minister straight on the blower to his counterpart, Dan Tehan, here on the ABC.
You've spoken to the New Zealand Trade Minister. Did he offer you an apology?
Look, I'm not going to go into the details of the conversation this morning. He's put out a statement this afternoon. I respect the fact that he's done that.
The statement from Mr O'Connor says, "We do not speak for Australia on this or any other matter." Apart from that, little else. Silence from the Prime Minister's office, silence from the Foreign Minister. Robert Asen, who's Professor of Strategic Studies at Victoria University, says Mr O'Connor should have known better.
The Australians, who are New Zealand's most important relationship, there aren't many things they would like less than to hear that the way to solve their relationship problems with China, which are very difficult, is to show more respect to Beijing. That's not a very wise thing for a New Zealand Trade Minister to say.
And there's a longer-term problem too.
It feeds into this narrative that's still out there that New Zealand only sees China through a trade lens and that is not aware of some of the more difficult aspects of China's rise, which Australia is very conscious of.
It's a point made by Paul Madison, a former diplomat, now head of the Defence Research Institute at the University of New South Wales.
What is disappointing, I think, is that it takes away the opportunity for like-minded liberal democracies like New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and all the rest to work hard on developing a sort of a concerted voice, a coherent set of messages around how the relationship with China will be engaged.
But not everyone thinks the advice was so out of line. James Lawrenson from the Australia-China Relations Institute says it has a ring of truth.
Some of the reaction in Australia just seemed way over the top. And I think that sort of hints at a bit of sensitivity on the Australian side and a concern that perhaps we're not managing the China relationship as well as we might have.
It's the trans-Tasman relationship, though, that risks being strained at a time of already high tension regarding a potential travel bubble. But for all the frustration voiced to Australian media, the official line from across the ditch is all is well.
I've got nothing but warmth towards New Zealand, and I'm looking forward to having further discussions with my counterpart, hopefully next week if our officials can arrange it.
Now there's a lesson in diplomacy. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, the company boss chartering the ship stuck in limbo after being refused visa exemptions is with us. The mop-up is done, but plenty of questions linger about the burst main, the water main in central Wellington, and a new tune to celebrate Mozart's 265th birthday. Do get in touch about anything you've heard on the program this evening. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and there's always email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now with Susanna.
A cruise ship anchored off the New Zealand coast has been told to turn around by Immigration Minister Kris Faafoi. Leah Lapérouse was granted an economic exemption to come here, but Mr Faafoi says approval was given for some staff, such as maintenance workers. He says the cruise ship continued coming here despite Immigration New Zealand twice declining visa applications for non-critical hotel staff. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins denies any suggestion that standards are slipping at managed isolation hotels. Health officials are investigating how the virus spread between guests at Auckland's Pullman Hotel, with 2 more cases now linked to the strain identified there. And Chris Hipkins says a staff member's bedroom encounter with a returnee at the Grand Millennium this month was an isolated incident. There are no new community cases today, but 6 new COVID-19 infections have been recorded in managed isolation. The close contacts of the 3 people who tested positive after leaving Auckland's Pullman Hotel have all returned negative results. The Health Ministry says of the 353 guests who left the Pullman between January the 9th and 24th, 313 have tested negative. Auckland police are worried that bystanders filmed and then shared on social media a serious attack on an officer. The officer had stopped a fleeing car at Orake when he was attacked. A 41-year-old man was due to appear in court today on charges of injuring with intent and possession of methamphetamine. A series of hui on the Royal Commission report on the 2019 Mosque massacre has been criticised as being too rushed and superficial and lacking input from the Muslim community. The 28 hui aim to address questions about the report, the government's response and how the community can engage with that. Canterbury District Health Board has issued a health warning due to contaminants such as sulphur dioxide and smoke from a tyre factory at Racecourse Road near Amberley. It says exposure to smoke can affect people who suffer from asthma and heart disease, and those affected should close windows and doors and reduce outdoor exercise. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And it's time to catch up with Friday's business news with Nona Peltier. Consumer confidence, you've got the latest. So it's on the rise, but a bit still short from where we were at before COVID?
Yeah, for sure it is. And part of that is, of course, because of the housing market. Really, confidence where the housing market is concerned is at the highest level it's been since they first started asking that question in 2010. So this is the ANZ Consumer Confidence Survey that they do with Roy Morgan. And interesting that the housing market is leading this, although that's not expected to last. And the reason is not because so much prices are going to drop, but that the housing affordability is such that really it will start to run out of steam because it will start to depress people because they can't buy a house. So right now it's good, but later on not so good. And one of the things that we did see in this latest survey is the number of people prepared to spend their money on a large household item. It rose a net 21% think it's a good time. That's kind of interesting. And a lot of that is sort of money that would have gone for, say, overseas spending is now staying at home, so people don't have the opportunity to travel. Overall, it's kind of a mixed consumer sentiment survey because it's still not as strong as it has been. The latest numbers show that, look, it rose 2 points to 114, but that's still well short of a historic average of 120.
Now, remind me, what period was it taken over?
This is the confidence over January.
Right.
So this month just ended. Yeah.
So it's pretty up to date.
It's as up to date as we're going to have for today.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's look now at these share trading platforms, right? So a lot of people have got into this over lockdown as well, but there's a couple of, well, they're not glitches, but difficulties with foreign stocks. What's going on?
Well, there was this a surge in a share price in a company called GameStop, and it's a retail bricks and mortar business. And so what happens, institutional investors will short sell their stocks. So on the idea that the price of these stocks today will drop tomorrow, and then when they have to fill that position, and they'll get them at a cheaper price. Well, some of these retail investors banded together and thought, hey, we can play this game too, and brought the price up. So institutional investors had to fill their short positions at higher prices, not lower prices, which caused all sorts of chaos. And the prices rose and rose to the point where it unsettled Wall Street overall and caught the attention of the new treasurer, Janet Yellen, and the Securities Commission and many others. And it also caused the apps that were selling the shares to retail investors to put pauses, basically.
So it was the mouse that roared, basically.
Yes. Some people are calling it David and Goliath. Other people are saying it's mischief-making, market manipulation, all range of things. What it is exactly is basically retail investors doing to Wall Street what we've seen social media do to the media, for example, or banking, or what have you. There's a disruption going on, and this is going to be probably something that we're going to see more of. I don't know that you would call it unsophisticated trading. These people certainly seem to know what they were doing, but not everyone would have known. And so our local software app suppliers, Hatch, for example, Shares is another, are focusing on education to make sure that investors who are less sophisticated and perhaps don't really know what they're getting themselves into take a good look at the risks involved. These are, short selling. Most people don't even understand what that is. Never mind play the game. So beware.
Okay. What else has been going on in the markets today, Nona?
Overall, the market has a sort of a negative tone, not just because of this, this Wall Street thing with the GameStop, not only with GameStop, but other companies like even American Airlines and BlackBerry. So anyway, this unsettled the market somewhat, but also just generally the job numbers, the jobless numbers in the United States are at, contracted as fast as they did in World War II. People are worried about how the COVID-19 is taking over, world economies. So that's weighing on the market. So overall, though, we ended up 41 points, which is pretty darn good. That's a rise of 0.3% to 13,127. And our dollar is steady. So that's quite good. It's steady at 71.5 US cents, 93.6 Australian, and 52.2 pence. So it looks like New Zealand is just steady as she goes for now.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with our business update. Now, we've got a quick traffic update for you. In Auckland on State Highway 20, that's the southwestern motorway, there's a crash which is slowing down traffic after Puhinui Road. Motorists are asked to pass the scene with care and expect delays. Several Māori staff at Auckland's Unitec have resigned over what they say is institutionalised racism at the campus. The Unitec staff collective, Te Ropu Matara, says Māori have been disrespected and staff and students feel culturally unsafe. Alice Stewart and visual journalist Dan Cook report on an institution at crisis point.
This morning at 10 a.m, around 300 people gathered from the community to stand with Tui Alu, who has resigned as the chair of the Runanga. Te Runanga, or Te Whare Wānanga or Wairaka, is Unitec's non-executive advisory group, which was founded in 1991 to ensure that they were considering how the Māori perspective was being represented and heard within the institution. Tui Alu, who has worked there for 21 years, cited disrespect shown to Māori. In protest, she removed her father's, Sir John Ture's, framed portrait from the Tertiary Institute and walked it down to the Te Noho Kotahinga Marae. Sir John Ture was a tūhoe rangatira and one of the most respected figures in Māoridom throughout his lifelong involvement with the community and the Waitangi Tribunal. Spokesperson and member of the Runanga, Hari Rua, says Tui and her whānau are devastated.
I feel for Tui. Obviously, taking down the photo is not an easy decision. And that's a reflection of how they feel right now with regard to our koroua, Te Ahi Kaiata, John Ture being removed from the walls of from the whare here at Unitec.
Hari Rua said that Unitec had thrived under previous leadership with a model that prioritised listening and working alongside Māori. However, in August of 2020, the leadership changed and a new CEO, Gus Gilmore, was appointed. Hari Rua said that's when the situation deteriorated.
And now we've got this new leadership on board, and they didn't show really any interest in continuing with their model. So pretty much it's their model of Pākehā sitting on top and then Māori sit underneath and follow instructions. That's the model which we weren't okay with as a runanga. And so we challenged the system, challenged the process, and put a view forward to sit the tumu Māori alongside the CEO, not answer to the CEO, but sit alongside, so you have their manorite again.
He says Te Tiriti o Waitangi is not being upheld at Unitec by the current leadership.
They can go back to government and they can say, we consulted with Māori, we consulted with the Runanga. Really all it is ticking boxes, but they're not interested in actually sitting eye to eye and meeting and discussing some of the simple things that we as a Runanga felt was really important.
Glenn McKay of Te Ariwa descent is Te Tumu, an executive director of student success at Unitec. He also resigned because of racism. Researcher and spokesperson Rihi Tenana says without any Māori on the senior leadership team, they fear for their cultural safety.
We are leaderless and rudderless as Māori in this institution, and we have to ask ourselves who is going to look after our staff, who is going to really hold to that process. This is a very precarious position that we are in, but as a united group, we believe that we can sit and hold, strategise and think about how do we want to move forward.
Student Irene Farnham echoed similar feelings felt by others that spoke, calling out the CEO for not listening to their concerns as Māori.
One thing that was very clear to me is he did not see us, he did not hear us. There's been a breach of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, there's been a breach of our rights.
Unitec declined to be interviewed on Checkpoint, but provided a statement from the board chair, Peter Winder.
I acknowledge the sadness of this day. We also acknowledge the mana of the late Sir John Joseph Te Ahikaiata Ture, his immense contribution to Unitec, education and Aotearoa. Our board and institute leadership will continue open dialogue with Kaimahi and Te Runanga as we move forward from today. We are dedicated to effective partnership and honouring Te Tiriti principles in all that we do. We are committed to working towards a resolution of the issues raised so together we can support the future success of our students.
Ko Ella Stewart tēnei.
And if you are watching that, you can see the video for Ella and Dan's piece on our webpage. A new addition to the police uniform is attracting international attention. After almost a year and a half and some pretty rigorous stress testing, police and design experts from Massey University have developed a hijab that's now an official part of the uniform. And it's caught the eye of a UK police district that is trialling the hijab there. Inspector Braden Lenehan explains how he got involved in the project.
In about late 2018, we received some reports from some of our staff that had been at a careers day, and they were getting questions from young Muslim women as to why there was no hijab as part of the uniform, and that they'd be considering a career in the police, but that was something that was holding them back. So clearly, having heard that, we started to look around. We looked internationally as to what was available for other police departments and found that actually there was nothing, and women of Muslim faith were having to actually provide their own. We thought this was a bit of a gap and a bit of an area where we could probably be leaders in this space. So we partnered with a very good partner of ours in the Massey University School of Design.
So, sorry, Inspector, this isn't just about giving current police officers this additional part of their uniform. It was actually about throwing the door open to new recruits who might otherwise have been put off because you didn't have an option to wear a hijab. That's exactly right, Lisa. Yeah. So, tell me, how hard was it to kind of marry up the cultural needs of this this hijab, as well as the practicalities of policing? Because obviously, sometimes police wear other headgear, you've got communication equipment. How difficult was it to marry the two up?
Look, I wouldn't say it was difficult, especially having a fantastic partner like we did with the Massey School of Design. They really played a key element in us getting to where we finally got to. For us, we develop uniform, other parts of uniform for the New Zealand Police, and having that experience, we knew that we had to have something that had was comfortable, had good fit and functionality. Obviously, you mentioned the earpiece there, but also that somebody could wear that was comfortable for them for a long duration of time, either an 8, 10, maybe even a 12-hour shift, where they wouldn't get overheated with something covering their head the entire time. So what came out of that is the material that we settled on, which is quite a light sports type material that's moisture wicking, reasonably cutting edge in terms of its design, in terms of how form-fitting it is for the person, and also some safety features in there to look after our people.
What do you mean by safety features?
So a hijab can be fastened in many ways, and unfortunately sometimes how it's fastened can be too secure. So if an officer is involved in an altercation that involves the hijab being pulled from their heads, if that fastening is too secure, it might not give, and unfortunately that becomes either a choking or a dragging risk for our officers. So in terms of the clasping mechanism and the release mechanism for that, that was quite key for us in terms of our officer safety and looking after our people.
So how did you trial it?
So initially we started with a number of female members of Police National Headquarters, trialling it out just in terms of its fit and functionality. Now, I'll say they weren't Muslim females, however, they were able to provide us with some pretty clear indications from some of the early prototypes that things were too heavy or too tight, that didn't breathe. And following that, we sent it out to the Royal New Zealand Police College, where some female defensive tactics trainers actually wore it whilst they were training and putting it through tactical training and really putting it through its paces.
So is it now an official part of the police uniform, and can you choose to wear it without having to seek out special permission?
Yes, you can. So members of the Muslim faith, females of the Muslim faith, if they choose to wear the hijab, it is available for them. It is an approved official piece of New Zealand police uniform that is provided for them, as is every other item of police uniform.
So why is this now attracting attention from overseas, and who's looking to what you have created here?
Right, well, this is actually quite a fantastic story, Lisa. So we put out a bit of a press release in relation to our graduating constable, who was our first trialist and is now wearing the hijab operationally. And it would appear that media release has been picked up by the Leicestershire Muslim Police Association. They've got in touch with us and said they're very, very keen to see how that could work for their members. So we've been in conversations with them and to see how we can provide for them their needs. And put them in touch both with my team and also the team at the Massey School of Design around their requirements.
So does it look like they may trial what is in essence your prototype?
Yes, more than looks like. This afternoon we sent across, I saw them being put into the envelope, another 3 hijabs in the Leicestershire black, which is the colour of their uniform. There's already 1 hijab over there being worn by a trainee constable. So the 3 that are sending over this afternoon, 1 is a second item of uniform for that trainee constable, so that she has 2 that she can rotate and wash and keep clean. And the other 2 are being trialled by the Leicestershire Police Health and Safety Committee to ensure that it fits within the standards that they require.
Was this a pretty interesting experience for you? I know you work in uniform editions and equipment all the time, but this particular project, what did you get out of it, do you think?
Look, I think whenever you can provide something that enables a section of the community that has previously felt like that they couldn't be part of the New Zealand Police or be part of their community, I think to be able to do that is pretty special. And I think in this position, my team is really, really proud of what they've achieved here.
And that was Inspector Braden Lenihan. It is 9 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. After 6 tonight, Aaron Russ of Wild Earth Travel, the company that chartered the ship that is stuck in limbo just outside New Zealand waters, will give us his take on the visa issue. Aro Street in central Wellington was mopping up today after spectacular scenes when a huge water main burst yesterday. It sent water gushing down the road and a huge geyser of water up to 20 metres into the air. Today was a case of business as usual for locals, but the question on their mind, will it happen again? Our reporter Jonathan Mitchell and video journalist Samuel Rillstone filed this report.
It's more than 24 hours since yesterday's pipe burst down here on Aro Street. A digger behind me remains at the scene, and there's about half a dozen workers clearing the pipe and removing the debris.
Heather Patterson from the St Vincent de Paul Society op shop just down the road from the burst water main witnessed it firsthand and heard a huge bang. She's thankful it didn't enter the shop.
I've seen floods and that, but nothing like this. This was just something you see on a movie, you know, serious, all this water coming, you know. So, yeah, it was amazing but terrifying, really, in one way, because all I could think of was all that water going down the drain, you know. And there was a lot of it because it was right down Arrow Street.
And the leftover debris is still evident today. Rocks are scattered down the side of the road.
Up the road there's a car you could see there's a huge rock stuck in under the car, so I don't think he'll be driving away anytime soon. But I'm so pleased no one or nothing got seriously damaged.
Further down Aro Street, Ryan Greer works at Aro Bake Cafe. He was out the back doing dishes when the water main burst. He saw the huge rush of water flow down the road, and he hoped his flat nearby was okay.
It's kind of muddy outside our front door, and there was like a bunch of stones outside the garage, but the street sweeper got them.
It's been a rough week for the city's infrastructure. A sewage pipe burst earlier in the week and had to be repaired quickly. Local workers near Civic Square were beset by a foul stink, with one telling RNZ it smelt like sewage had been dumped in his office. A report from December found a third of wastewater pipes in the city are in either poor or very poor condition. City Councillor Sean Rush holds the water portfolio. He's written an urgent letter to stakeholders, including Wellington Water today, asking for action.
Look, let's have a target of no major incidents over next summer. And we've got the year to get on with getting to know our system, to make sure that any other reports that have been put together in relation to these critical assets have not been lost or are being actioned.
He says there's broad support around the council table for more money to be thrown at the city's infrastructure. But the question is, will that mean a double-digit rate hike?
We'll be looking at the asset management plans for all our assets, and there'll be a trade-off. It may well be that rates don't increase, but my expectation is, to be quite honest, is that rates will increase in order to cover the infrastructure repairs and maintenance that are needed for a 21st century system.
Wellington Water says it's made good progress with repairing the water main. It says debris and silt from the burst pipe did make its way into the stormwater network and down into the harbour. However, it says that has been controlled. For Checkpoint, Court Jonathan Mitchell-Aho.
The World Health Organization is trying to calm mounting tensions over the availability of coronavirus vaccines. The European Union is threatening to impose tighter controls over the vaccine rollout after claiming EU countries aren't getting the doses they were promised. Instead, it says the UK is being favoured. Here's the ABC's Linton Besser.
While AstraZeneca has promised Downing Street it will continue to guarantee 2 million doses a week for Britain, it's told the EU another story altogether. The 27-nation bloc should expect only 1/4 of the 100 million doses the company originally promised to deliver by the end of March. AstraZeneca is producing its vaccine at facilities in the UK and in Europe, and it's blamed a slowdown in its European production because of problems at a plant in Belgium. Now, Belgian authorities have launched an investigation into the facility. Here's the European Commission spokesman, Stefan de Kersmaker.
An audit inspection has been undertaken by the Belgian authorities. We do not comment on the scope, on why it's been undertaken, what has been audited, because obviously this is something that falls in the scope of this inspection, and we really cannot comment on that.
His comments come a day after the EU's Health Commissioner, Stella Kyriakides, cranked up the rhetoric.
We reject the logic of first come, first serve. That may work at the neighbourhood butchers, but not in contracts.
The EU wants AstraZeneca to take doses produced in Britain and redirect them across the English Channel.
The UK factories are part of our advanced purchase agreements, and this is why they have to deliver.
Another EU official, Eric Mamer, was even more blunt.
We can and will get doses of the vaccine from the
series of plants which are mentioned in the contract, and therefore also including those in the United Kingdom.
But AstraZeneca signed its UK contract 3 months earlier and said it would not be making up any European shortfall at the expense of Britain's supply.
There is a general awareness, there is a general goodwill and understanding that no one is safe until everyone is safe. But the reality is that for the time being there is realistically a shortfall of vaccines.
That's the European Director of the WHO, Hans Kluge, who was seeking to bring the temperature down.
We don't doubt that the manufacturers and the producers are also working 24/7 to bridge the gap, and that I would remain confident that a delay which we're seeing now is going to be made up by extra production in the near future.
AstraZeneca and the EU are now vowing to work together to resolve their differences, but with vaccines so sorely in demand, future flashpoints are almost inevitable.
And that was Linton Besser reporting. A lot of you getting in touch about COVID-19, the cruise ship and managed isolation. Let's start with MIQ and people heading straight to Australia once they get out of MIQ in New Zealand. This person says the government needs to stop New Zealand quarantine being used by people to travel to Australia. These people shouldn't be able to leave without paying for it either. Graham says MIQ ditch jumpers, send them the bill for their stay and follow up with debt collectors. No sympathy. There are many hundreds of genuine Kiwis still trying to get back, and these people don't deserve any wiggle room at all, says Graham. Another person's got in touch to say if returnees are going to travel on after managed isolation, at least the government should link their debt to the visa system and require they pay full costs before departure. Time to be hard-hearted. On the ship bobbing around off the coast of New Zealand, because most of the workers don't have visas, they've been denied. This person says the borders open or shut, you can't come without a visa. Simple. If you can't get a visa and you come on a plane, they'll turn you around. Same rules apply. Owner of the company should pay the repercussions of his ignorance. Lynn has also got in touch to say the Minister of Immigration is absolutely right. Unless this cruise company has appropriate visas for all on board, this cruise ship cannot come to New Zealand. Don't we all know about the previous disasters during last year's cruise ship COVID-19 outbreak? We will hear from the company who has chartered that ship after 6.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata with tēnei. The Immigration Minister says a cruise ship that is waiting offshore after being denied entry into New Zealand waters has 2 options if it wants to come here. Immigration had told the owner of the luxury Lela Perouse that 61 of the 90 crew members would not be granted visas because they weren't considered essential workers. Minister Kris Faafoi told Checkpoint the ship should think carefully about its next move.
They can come here and dock, and the ship has actually been approved for some maintenance. Crew of that ship who have been approved visas could stay, but the 61 who aren't crucial for that would have to leave immediately. The other option is the ship could refuel, restock, and all 90 crew on board would have to leave as soon as possible.
Immigration New Zealand says it told the company twice while it was en route to New Zealand that not all of the crew had been granted visas. COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says there's no indication standards are slipping at managed isolation hotels. Health officials are investigating how the virus spread between guests at Auckland's Pullman Hotel. They've learned 2 more previous COVID-19 cases likely caught the virus during their stay at the hotel rather than overseas. At the Grand Millennium Managed Isolation Hotel, a staff member has lost their job after a 20-minute encounter with a returnee this month. Chris Hipkins says it was an isolated incident.
We're dealing with human beings. We ask everybody to adhere to the standards that we put in place. I cannot control the actions of every individual, but we absolutely make clear what the rules are, and where people breach the rules, there are consequences.
There are no new COVID-19 cases in the community today. Auckland police are concerned that bystanders filmed an assault on an officer, then shared it on social media. An officer stopped a vehicle at Orake and tried to arrest a man, but was assaulted for a prolonged time. A number of bystanders witnessed the assault and some filmed it and shared it on Facebook and Twitter. Superintendent Karen Malthus says the video shows the officer in a very dangerous and vulnerable position. She says he was taken to hospital. A 41-year-old man has been charged with injuring with intent, possession of methamphetamine and escaping police custody. A Muslim man whose son was murdered in the Christchurch Mosque shootings is sceptical about the government holding a host of hui from this weekend. The nationwide series of 28 hui with Muslims and ethnic groups begins in Wellington on Sunday. They aim to address questions about the Royal Commission of Inquiry's report on the attacks. But Rashid Omar believes the hui are just a box-ticking exercise.
I think the government has already decided what they want to do, and it's just a matter of going through the motion of telling us what they want to do.
Rashid Omar, who attended a hui for victims in Christchurch last month. Other attendees say that hui was useful. A tense public meeting in Tauranga on the topic of Māori wards descended into chaos this afternoon. More than 100 people turned up at the meeting, where Hobson's Pledge spokesperson Don Brash was among those speaking against Māori wards. A group of about 50 people in favour of Māori wards were also present. There was yelling, heckling and calls for order. Others simply walked out of the meeting. Whether Māori wards will be introduced in Tauranga will now go to a referendum after a petition calling for a community vote met the necessary threshold. One of the world's largest car makers, General Motors, is to phase out production of petrol-powered cars and trucks. The US firm says by 2035 it will sell only vehicles that have zero tailpipe emissions. Our correspondent Kate Fisher reports.
The announcement is likely to put pressure on car makers across the world to make similar commitments. President Biden may also use GM's decision as a reason to push for more aggressive legislation to fight climate change. Across production and supply chains, the auto industry employs more Americans than any other manufacturing sector. Around 1 million people could be affected by a seismic shift in the business. It would also have major implications for the oil and gas sectors. Kate Fisher, Washington.
Smoke inhalation warnings have been issued for people around Racecourse Road near Amberley, north of Christchurch, following a tyre fire. The Canterbury DHB has issued the public health warning, especially to those who may be sensitive to smoke. That includes people with heart or lung conditions, pregnant women, young children and the elderly. It says the main contaminant from tyre fires is sulphur dioxide, which can cause respiratory problems. People are being urged to close windows and doors and reduce outdoor activity. It's almost 5 minutes past 6. Luna Rossa has dominated the opening 2 races of the America's Cup Challenger Series semi-finals, easily beating American Magic. It won the opening race by more than 2.5 minutes and then took the second by over 3 minutes to go 2-0 up in the best of 7 series. After the race, Luna Rossa helmsman Francesco Bruni told TVNZ they were nervous ahead of today's racing as they hadn't performed well in the round-robin series.
In the past, the boat has not been the fastest in the strong wind, but we knew that we had made some big improvements in performance. We knew it, we had it on the numbers, but now to see it on the water is a different feeling.
There are 2 more races tomorrow, and if Luna Rossa wins those, they'll advance to the Prada Cup final against Team UK. The winner of that series will then go on to race Team New Zealand in the America's Cup. Liverpool have returned to winning ways after a commanding 3-1 win over Tottenham Hotspur in English football's Premier League. The win moves them up to 4th, 4 points behind leaders Manchester City, who have a game in hand. Tottenham remains 6th. Australia's Super Netball competition is forging ahead with plans for a full 14-week season kicking off on May 1st. After spending a shortened 2020 season in a hub in Queensland, Super Netball hopes to have a full home and away season. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Phil O'Brien is in the hot seat, and given its Auckland anniversary weekend, we'll have a Sonic Tonic dedicated to sailing. Will you play Rod Stewart or Enya? The underground rhythm and blues of Wild Things is the Friday night live act, and Country Life is back, where business is booming if you're in the business of breeding Wiltshire sheep. On Nights with Phil O'Brien, filling in for Brian Crump. After the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from NZers to midnight tomorrow. Northern and western areas from Northland to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Cloudy periods and isolated showers tonight. Fine or becoming fine tomorrow, but morning showers about Northland, South Taranaki and Wellington. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, mostly cloudy with a few showers. Showers becoming confined to Gisborne and Northern Hawke's Bay tomorrow night, with fine spells increasing elsewhere. For Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Westland and Northern Fiordland, fine apart from isolated showers about the ranges tonight, tomorrow afternoon and evening also. Canterbury and North Otago, long fine spells, but showers about the ranges and Banks Peninsula, clearing tomorrow morning. Central Otago, Dunedin, Clutha, Southland and Southern Fiordland, showers easing tonight, then clearing to fine weather tomorrow. And Chatham Islands, occasional showers clearing tomorrow afternoon. RNZ National, it's coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A travel company that's charter cruise ship is stuck in limbo off the coast of New Zealand because most of the crew can't get visas, says the government's let it down. The boat Le Laperouse was granted an exemption to come here for cruise season, but the government says the owners were told the crew all needed to get individual visas to cross our closed borders. Immigration New Zealand says the ship set sail from Jakarta just 2 days after filing applications for 90 foreign crew. But we're told twice during the journey that 61 of the crew did not meet the criteria for critical workers and had been denied visas. Wild Earth Travel is chartering the ship for cruises to the sub-Antarctic. The company believes when the ship was approved for an entry visa, there was an undertaking given to allow all the crew in too. Speaking to Aaron Russ via satellite phone from Dusky Sound, I asked him how he's going to break the deadlock.
I really don't see what the solution is, because the crew for the ship really have to have significant training and expertise to be able to deliver the ship and deliver the voyage which we've set out to do. So they have to have safety training and long experience to be able to safely navigate the ship. And the minister seems to think that the New Zealanders is the solution, but the time frames really haven't allowed that to be a workable solution aside from the other challenges.
The minister has indicated that the 60-odd people who have been denied visas are waiters and bar staff and hairdressers. Is that a fair summary of what their roles would be? That's what they're employed to do. But in addition to that, they've been specifically trained to undertake the safety of the vessel. So they're also, in addition to that, they're firefighters. They're on stretcher parties. They've been trained to undertake the safe evacuation of the vessel in the event of an emergency. So while they have one primary role on board, they've been specifically trained for other duties in regard to the fact that it is a passenger vessel. So who botched this up? Because the minister says that this cruise ship left Jakarta just 2 days after filing for visas. So the boat left before they had any answers about whether the visas would be approved or not. That doesn't seem particularly sensible.
The information that I have is that the owners were working closely with the Ministry of Health, and they submitted their applications for the ship's arrival, which were approved by the Ministry of Health, detailing all the crew that were necessary for them to complete delivery to a business, being our company which has chartered the ship for a series of voyages in New Zealand. And I mean, if anything, I would say that if there's been a misunderstanding, it's simply because the process is exceptionally unclear currently with the rules and regulations.
The minister says the boat was approved to come, but the crew were not, and they each had to have individual visas, and the minister maintains that this was made very clear and that the boat was notified on 2 occasions while it was en route that these people would not be given visas. Has he got that wrong?
I can't comment to that, as I'm the charterer in New Zealand. I was first informed by the owners of the vessel 2 days ago that the Immigration Department was intending to deny visas for the 61 hotel crew. Prior to that, I was not aware of any correspondence.
So to be clear, Aaron, as the person who's chartering the ship, for you, the owners of that vessel are the ones who have absolute responsibility for making sure all the paperwork is right and everybody has a visa.
Yes, that's correct. And despite I've been involved with the application process through the Ministry of Health, but the government departments have also been very clear that they will only communicate with the owners of the vessel. So I've, as a charterer, am a third party to that relationship.
Right, so you're stuck in the middle here. I mean, how many people are booked to go on this cruise ship through you, and what does this mean?
So, but through our company, we have in excess of 300 people due to travel on the ship over the coming couple of months. So the ship's due to be in New Zealand. There's approximately 700 New Zealanders over the course of their time in New Zealand that are booked to voyage aboard the La Perouse while it's in New Zealand.
The Minister says it was unwise to take bookings for this ship when the paperwork wasn't sorted out.
So the information was that we took the bookings that we've taken were after the Ministry of Health clearance, which was given, and the communication which the Minister is referring to is information which I'm not privy to if it has occurred.
So when you say after the Ministry of Health approval, are you talking about the approval, the economic approval for the ship to come in, to have work done on it, and then for it to be handed over to you for the charters?
Yes, that's correct. So from late December or just prior to Christmas onward is when those clients that we have travelling have confirmed their arrangements to travel on the understanding that the ship had been granted approval to undertake the to a New Zealand voyage, which the application was for.
Aaron, did you check if the crew had all their visas signed off?
I understood that through third-party communication, that through the owners, that they had submitted all the approvals to the Ministry of Health on the basis of the full crew coming down to New Zealand, and the communication that I've seen in the last 24 hours indicates that, as the Minister stated, he believes that they're simply waiters and hotel staff that can easily be recruited, effectively press ganged off the dock in New Zealand if required, rather than the highly trained and qualified crew that actually is aboard the ship.
Who were you dealing directly with in terms of the ship and their owners?
The owners. I deal with the owners' representatives, and they are based in both Australia and in Europe.
Have they let you down here?
No, I don't believe they've let me down in the slightest. I personally believe that the New Zealand government has let us down when we've taken all the steps to deliver some unique experiences for New Zealanders to set out and explore New Zealand over the coming months.
Aaron, how do you think the New Zealand government has let you down?
I believe that the New Zealand government has let us down by not enabling the ship to come in, despite the fact that it's coming with a highly experienced and qualified crew. This is New Zealand companies that are working to their utmost during challenging times of COVID to continue to deliver unique experiences for New Zealanders. They are innovating, and the government simply is adopting an approach which is preventing that innovation from occurring over an interpretation of the roles which the hotel crew aboard the ship fulfill.
They would say they're keeping us safe.
The ship's crew that they've issued visas for, the officers and engineers are aboard the exact same ship as the hotel crew. They've all been through 27 days of quarantine. If the ship didn't have the hotel crew aboard, it would be permitted to enter New Zealand tomorrow. But because it has the hotel crew aboard, it's now no longer safe. It just doesn't make sense from a health perspective. This is an ideological approach to the border.
What happens to all the customers booked on your cruises?
Well, we'll have to start having a conversation with them about what the options are and whether they want to look to travel again in the future, or whether they want to be refunded. The money is available to be refunded, but as you can imagine, the disappointment will be immense, and the loss of jobs throughout New Zealand as a result of these voyages not occurring, I suspect will be greater than the possible jobs that would have been garnered by creating these hotel jobs on board the ship.
What's your financial hit out of this?
Over $1.5 million.
Ouch. That's got to really hurt, Aaron.
Yes, it does. It hurts exceptionally when there's not a health risk. It's as outlined, the crew on board the ship have all completed the outlined health procedures. They've simply been denied entry to New Zealand on the basis of whether they're deemed to be critical workers or not on their health status, which has been approved. Their health procedures have been approved by the Ministry of Health.
The Wiggles are coming, though, Aaron.
I know the Wiggles are coming, and they're obviously essential.
And that was Aaron Russ, who's from Wild Earth Travel, and that's the company that has chartered this ship that's stuck in limbo at the moment off the coast of New Zealand. Now, we'd love to hear from you if you were booked on one of those trips. They were going to the sub-Antarctic. If you were supposed to be going on one of those journeys in the next few weeks, we'd love to hear from you. You can text us on 2101 or email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 18 minutes past 6. The world's top tennis players are coming out of 2 weeks hotel quarantine, almost a week before the Australian Open starts. Complaints by some players, including the world number one, Novak Djokovic, riled the Melbourne public, who went through a months-long lockdown. A sports psychologist says players who have been in hard lockdown will most likely have lost some strength, and their ability to bounce back will vary. The ABC's Samantha Donovan has more.
It's been a lead-up to the Australian Open like no other, for the 72 players required to do 2 weeks hard lockdown because someone on their flight tested positive. Mattresses and walls have become hitting partners. Some players emerged from their quarantine hotels last night. Wearing masks, they were bussed to new hotels.
Are you guys happy to be free?
But for others, quarantine isn't over just yet. American Tennis Sandgren, the men's world number 50, tested positive to the virus before leaving Los Angeles. But he was allowed into the country because he was deemed to be shedding the virus he'd first contracted in November. He's posted a video to social media mocking Tennis Australia's handling of the situation.
I just found out we're not going to be able to leave the room till midnight, which will put us at close to 15 days in this room. That's also another day that we can't practice. So that's play Saturday, Sunday, Monday, play a match on Tuesday, a competitive tennis match. 15 days off, 16 days off, counting the 16 days off, 3 days hitting, tennis match. My name's Tennis Australia, and I'm so cool.
Professor David Bishop is a sports physiologist at Victoria University. He's expecting players will recover from their lockdown in different ways.
I think it's going to be a lot of surprises. You're going to have both the mental and the physical stuff. And so I think you're going to see some people cope really well and maybe almost get an advantage out of the situation. Whereas other people, I think it's going to really knock their preparation. Even 2 weeks with less activity, they're going to be losing fitness, they'll be losing a little bit of strength, and they may also be losing some strength and elasticity in their tendons, etc. So I think surviving a tennis match, as in finishing it, won't be probably be a bigger concern is the potential for injuries while they're playing there. But it wouldn't surprise me if there's a few extra injuries this year during the tournament.
And that's Professor David Bishop ending that report by the ABC's Samantha Donovan. A court in Russia has rejected a bid by the country's leading opposition activist, Alexei Navalny, to be released from detention. Mr Navalny, who last year survived a nerve agent attack that he believes was ordered by the government, says his arrest was illegal. Here's the BBC's Steve Rosenberg.
From inside jail, via video link, the Kremlin's most ferocious critic demanded his freedom. Alexei Navalny told the court his arrest was illegal, an attempt to scare him and his supporters. It wouldn't work, he added. We are the majority. The judge dismissed his appeal. More pressure. Police raiding Mr. Navalny's anti-corruption organisation. It had posted this video of Mr. Navalny accusing Vladimir Putin of building himself a £1 billion palace with illicit money. The Kremlin's denied it, but the videos had nearly 100 million views in a week. Palaces and political battles. What are Russians making of all of this outside Moscow? Tver is 100 miles away. Last weekend, there were protests here and across Russia in support of Mr. Navalny and against President Putin. Police broke them up. Among those detained was Pavel. It was the first time he'd taken part in a protest. A lot of people, Pavel says, have watched that video about the palace and believe it. On the streets of Tver, it's not so much that Russians believe in Alexei Navalny. It's just many people have stopped believing in the president. Putin's not the leader he was, says Yevgenia. Prices in the shops keep rising. He must have something to do with this. You could put a political opponent behind bars. One thing you cannot do, though, is lock away, put out of sight, the public mood. And the Kremlin's problem is that with the economy here in difficulty, Russians feel that life is getting tougher. And that means growing dissatisfaction with the authorities. But the Kremlin has this warning. Illegal protest brings chaos. The last thing Russia needs, it says, is another Russian revolution. Steve Rosenberg, Tver.
Eyebrows are being raised in America after Donald Trump met with the Republican Party's Leader of the House, Kevin McCarthy, at the former president's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. Many in Washington believe Donald Trump is still the de facto head of the party, which is deeply divided between Trump loyalists and those wanting to rid themselves of his shadow. CNN's Jeff Zelalny has this report.
The American flag is proudly waving today at former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. But the shining sun belies the storm brewing inside the Republican Party. Kevin McCarthy, the House GOP leader, made a pilgrimage to Florida, hoping to get back into the former president's good graces after angering Trump following the deadly attack on the Capitol.
The president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters.
McCarthy has been backpedaling ever since, making clear he still sees Trump as the leader of the Republican Party, a view not shared by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who hasn't spoken to Trump in more than a month. With his looming impeachment trial, Trump remains front and center in the Republican Party, even as it faces an identity crisis. In a private call with House Republicans this week, McCarthy admonished his members to stop the infighting, CNN has learned, bluntly saying to cut that crap out, with no more attacks on one another. But he's done little to actually stop it, with Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz, a loyal Trump ally, traveling to Wyoming today to try taking down Liz Cheney, the number 3 House Republican who voted for Trump's impeachment.
If you want to prove that you have the power, defeat Liz Cheney in this upcoming election, and Wyoming will bring Washington to its knees.
The GOP turmoil is playing out as a series of sideshows, none louder than Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who deleted her social media posts after CNN reported she harassed victims of the Parkland school shooting and endorsed violence against Democratic lawmakers.
You don't have anything to say for yourself? You can't defend your stance?
The Congresswoman, who has promoted QAnon conspiracy theories, was given a plum seat on the House Education and Labor Committee. Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger, one of 10 House Republicans to support Trump's impeachment, said the party is at a dangerous crossroads.
Well, let's be clear, she's not a Republican. I personally don't think she should have any committees.
A fear of reining in fringe Republican elements has created an opening for Democrats, which Speaker Nancy Pelosi seized on today.
Assigning her to the Education Committee when she has mocked the killing of little children at Sandy Hook Elementary School, when she has mocked the killing of teenagers in high school at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. What could they be thinking?
Nancy Pelosi ending that report from CNN. A previously unknown piece of music by Mozart has premiered online on what would have been the composer's 265th birthday. The performance of the piece is part of a Mozart Week festival in the Austrian city of Salzburg, which is taking place digitally due to the pandemic. Bethany Bell reports from Vienna.
The Allegro in D major for piano is just over a minute and a half long, but it's complete.
What a joy to share with all of you this extraordinary moment. 94 seconds of new Mozart.
Rolando Villazon is the artistic director of the Mozart Week Festival in Salzburg, where the work has just been premiered online. It's a dance piece that Mozart probably wrote in 1773 when he was 17 years old, at the end of his third trip to Italy. The manuscript, in the composer's own handwriting, was acquired by the Mozarteum Foundation from a private owner. Ulrich Leisinger, the director of research at the Mozarteum, says the score appears to have been part of a letter to Mozart's sister, Nannerl.
We carefully studied paper and handwriting, and the piece of paper has a fold, and so I assume that it was an enclosure for a letter that Mozart sent to Salzburg. The addressee would have been Mozart's sister, who from time to time got nice little things from Wolfgang, and she was definitely the first who would have played this piece way back in 1773.
Now it's being performed by the South Korean pianist Song Jin-cho.
I'm very honored to play Mozart's Allegro in D major, which is newly rediscovered here in Salzburg, where's the city of Mozart. What I like the most about his music is his storytelling, and I can also feel some operatic moments even in his piano repertoire. I always enjoy playing the Mozart since when I was a child.
Ulrich Leisinger says he hopes the short work can perhaps become a favourite encore piece.
We hope that many people will get access to it, and we do our best. We provide the music online in various formats. You can see the original manuscript, and if you really want to hold it in your hands, you cannot get the manuscript. We don't give it away, but you can get a facsimile edition, which we have just published.
That report from Bethany Bell. And on the cruise ship stuck off the coast of New Zealand, this person says, I don't understand why people don't understand about closed borders. Someone else says government officials need in these extraordinary times to listen to the logic of businesses like Wild Adventures. Hotel workers on a cruise ship are essential.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A cruise ship company has been told it took a risk in letting Le La Pérouse set off for New Zealand before visas were granted for its crew. Australia's health minister says New Zealand's contact tracing system is excellent, and Canberra will tomorrow look at lifting a halt on quarantine-free travel. A man has been charged with injuring with intent and possessing methamphetamine after a video showing an officer being beaten was posted on social media. A fire in a pile of tyres near Amberley has been contained, but toxic smoke is still affecting people living downwind of Racecourse Road.